you want to hear a human voice. And so it really helps people feel more connected to the community when they know it's coming from a person. And I would say Braille is similar to that. It's a visceral connection to text in a way that it's you and the text without any sort of mediation. So I think there's a strength to that.
Welcome back to the Vision Mission, everybody. We're so glad to have you here. Today, I have a special guest with me, Martha, over at Audio Reader, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and tell us a little about her and her mission at Audio Reader.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me here today. I will start by telling you I've been working at Audio Reader for about a year and a half now. I actually started with Audio Reader as a volunteer. So about 7 years ago, I found out about the organization and I started as a part-time reader on the weekends. And then when a staff position opened, I was really excited to transition into full-time staff. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So you started as a volunteer. How long ago did you start as a volunteer? And then how did you get into the position that you are in now?
Yeah, so I started, I think it was the summer of, I would say 2018. I started because I was looking for some volunteer position that I could do on the weekends because I work full time. And I found Audio Reader and I always loved reading to my kids. So I think that was the hook for me. But when I started, I actually was reading Soap Opera Digest, which was filled with drama. And I really thought it was fun. And I also did a bunch of grocery store ads. So I think I did grocery store ads the whole time. So over 5 years of reading different ads. From Soap Opera Digest, I moved into Missouri NewsHour, which was very informative. And then the person who was outreach coordinator for Audio Reader for 30 years retired in fall of 2022. And so that's when the position opened up. And because I was connected with Audio Reader, I heard about it. And so I am now the communications and listener outreach coordinator. So that was the position I moved into.
Very cool, very cool. And so I know a little bit about Audio Reader, but for everyone out there that maybe doesn't know much about Audio Reader, this is the first time you've been hearing about Audio Reader. Can you give us a little rundown of the work you do, your mission, and just who is Audio Reader?
Yeah, so Audio Reader is an audio information system or network, and our mission is to foster independence by providing access to information and the arts for people who have difficulty reading standard print due to either vision loss, physical or learning disability, mobility challenges, or age. And so what that means is we're trying to convert the printed word into an audio format. So we have over 250 volunteers who read local newspapers, grocery store ads, magazines, books, all sorts of content focused on Kansas and Western Missouri. And then we put that out on our 24-hour broadcast. And it's also available on demand. So you can hear your local newspaper in an audio format read by someone who is local to the area and, pronounces it the way a local would. And it really just helps people who are struggling to read for whatever reasons get access to that information and really feel more independent.
That's awesome. So what kind of stuff does Audio Reader read? I know you said you did grocery ads and some about a soap opera, but what is the, I guess, range of Audio Reader?
Oh, it's a very wide range. So I think the key was it started with newspaper. So our founding volunteer, Petey Surf, in 1971, she was reading the local paper to a friend of hers who was in a nursing home. And that's kind of what spawned it. And so most of our content at the beginning was newspaper. So we read Kansas City Star, Topeka Capital Journal, Lawrence Times, Lawrence Journal World. And then we've expanded that out to also include Wichita. We read Sedalia, St. Joseph, all the way down to Joplin, Missouri. So we read a lot of the papers. I would say any papers that are producing at least once a week are somewhere in our program schedule. But then we've also expanded out into newspapers. So we read Business and Economy, for example. We read People Magazine. We read National Enquirer. We have an outdoor program, which reads a bunch of different outdoor newsletters and magazines, Home and Garden. There's a children's hour. There's also what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, we have some books in the evening. So that's another fun thing we've added. We have a mystery hour, an adventure hour, and a nonfiction hour. So there's different books you can hear every evening. And then again, if you really like the book, because everything's on demand, you could listen to the whole thing at once if you wanted to. So it's a large range of programs.
Awesome. And Audio Reader is a 24-hour, 7 days a week program organization, right? Like anyone can get on there at any time and find a book or a grocery ad, newspaper.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 24 hours in the live stream. So if you just go to the website or to Alexa and just hit listen live, then you're going to hear something on the other end. It's going to be a volunteer voice. But then there's really almost double that in content because we do special requests that we put on our SoundCloud page. For example, VFW magazine is a standing special request. We have a lot of veterans who read that and they want it in an audio format. So for some people, we actually mail them a CD every time we record it, but then we also make it available through our podcasting platforms like SoundCloud. And then we also can take special requests. So if there's a newsletter for your organization or your assisted living facility, we could convert that to audio as well.
I'll have to make note of that for those special requests, see if CCVI needs any of that.
Yeah. And we do
so
special request books as well. So sometimes we'll have a great example. Last year, we had a listener who he and his brother wrote a book together. And so there was no budget to get an audio version of it. So we had volunteers read it. And so it was really wonderful for him to be able to hear it back in an audio format.
That's so cool. I'm sure you do a lot of work with the community, and there's a lot of people out there that are appreciating what you do.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of the reoccurring things that you guys read is for veterans. And I kind of was wondering, what does the population that you serve look like? Is it mostly like a little bit of an older generation, a good mix throughout, like young to old? Is there like a wide range of visual impairments or possibly just general disabilities? But what does that population look like for you guys?
Yeah, so it is a wide range. So that's a great question. We can serve, anyone with a print disability. So that does sound pretty vague, but I would say more than half, maybe 50 to 60% are people who have lost their vision over the course of their life. So we have a lot of people with macular degeneration or diabetic retinopathy or glaucoma, things along that nature. We do have I think it's about 10% of our audience who were born blind. So that blind from birth, that can be, so we have all ranges of people who listen with that who are braille readers. So we do have our program guide and a lot of our printed documents in braille for our braille readers. But then we also cover anyone with dyslexia, which is another print disability. And so that can, again, range from anyone who's in school or out of school, any range. And then physical mobility, again, happens to anyone at all ages. So if you have, it's hard to hold the newspaper, for example, maybe Parkinson's or any sort of paralysis, that would all be qualifying conditions. So it really can cover a wide variety of different conditions and ages. A lot of our content does tend, again, to be a little bit older because the majority of our listeners are sort of older and people who had read the newspaper in the past and still want access to that information.
Of course.
Then we're slowly adapting, of course, as we have a younger audience who is more used to having online sources. So that's something we're always looking into.
It's kind of like having this newer, younger audience affecting some of those like long-term goals that Audio Reader has.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's one of the reasons we got into the Alexa device, because a lot of young people already have smart speakers and have that integrated into their life. And I feel like the world has moved more to an on-demand sort of world, when a lot of our listeners were kids, the shows are scheduled at a certain time and the family gets together to watch at that time, and being kind of around the TV guide schedule is how you manage your life. But now we kind of live in an on-demand world. So we want to make sure our programs are matching that need and making sure they're available anytime, so that people aren't set to that schedule, because we know everyone's lives are so different and busy. And we want people to be able to access it when it's convenient for them.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. That was very well said. Life is very much on demand now. It's whenever you want it. And for you guys, that's awesome that you do the 24/7, 7 days a week, like kind of
Yeah.
programming. It is, scheduled, but also you can get on there whenever and have those resources at the tip of your fingertips or tip of your
Yeah.
fingers.
Right. And, of course, as you know, working with a low and sort of non-sighted community, they were up at odd hours. It's just part of, not being beholden to the sunlight hours, I guess. So we have listeners who are up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and that's the time that they want to listen to the news. So, and I even changed the terminology. Like I say, we binge books. Like I don't even think that was a word that was in the common zeitgeist a few years ago. But now when I say binge a book, you know what it means.
Exactly. And hey, binge a book if it's interesting enough, might as well. And if it's right there for you, go for it.
Yeah.
And so, I'm wondering with audio readers' goals and just the overall general population that you serve, since you do have such a wide range in age and then also like diagnosis, what are your goals kind of looking like? Are they dependent on those like demographics? I'm sure, with the younger generation, those have certain goals, but what are, I guess, some big ones that audio reader is currently working towards?
Yeah. So one of the other services that we offer that's sort of beyond our 24-hour or 24-hour plus programming is live audio description. And so that's another way that I think the technology is moving, what people want more. So live audio description or audio description in general is available more and more with large, Hollywood produced movies. And so the audio description is going to add context, anything that would be a visual cue. They're going to describe it between the actors talking, the music, the sound effects, and things like that. So it makes the content much more enjoyable for someone who can't see those visual cues. And so we do offer live audio description at the theater. And so what that person is doing is sitting in the back of the room and describing the costumes and the scene changes, adding context if the audience does something intriguing or out of the normal. And the nature of it being live is because, the show must go on. Sometimes productions skip a scene or, something crazy
Mm.
happens and the scenery falls over. And so having someone there to describe it so that someone in the audience who maybe can't see those visual cues feels like they're part of the action. And so that's a thing that we have been doing sort of on call, like as people request it, but we would like to expand that and offer it so it's more available and help make sure audio tours are available at different museums. That's something we are trying
Absolutely.
to add in. And just in general, work with the community to make arts and entertainment accessible. And then, sort of long distance, we're trying to use the St. Louis radio reading service, Mind's Eye Radio, as an example. They've moved a lot into adaptive sports and supporting associations like the National Beep Baseball Association and
Interesting.
other adaptive sports. So we're just dipping our feet in the water at this point to see how we can support adaptive sports. And because we tend to be really passive. People just
Mm.
access us at their convenience and, that kind of thing. But we would like to have a more engaged, active role in the accessibility community. So we're seeing how we can do that through beep baseball or other sports.
Well, that's awesome. We're pretty big in the beep kickball here at
Oh, yeah.
CCVI. We do that with Alpha Point every year, so that's kind of right up our alley. It's awesome that you guys are moving more towards the adaptive sports.
Yeah, I
Um,
want to come check that out because that sounds like so much
Definitely,
fun. I
definitely.
really enjoyed
I'll let
watching
you know.
I enjoyed
Oh,
watching beep baseball, so I bet I'll feel the same about kickball. So
oh, definitely. I mean, for me, kickball just in general, like even as a kid, was like best day of the year and
yeah.
everything. So I'm pretty excited to see our kiddos play some beep kickball this fall. I think our first upcoming game get together is in September, I believe. But I'll let you know, and you should definitely come out one evening or
I would love
one
to. Yeah.
morning and join us. I've always
Yes.
heard it's very fun.
Yeah, I
And
definitely want to come out.
and so for the adaptive sports, can you kind of like enlighten me? Like, what does that look like from like audio reader? Because whenever I think of that, I do think of just like, sports were always, they were never televised before you
Mhm.
actually could watch it on TV, you would turn on your radio and they would describe like, so and so hit a home run and is now running to first base and everything. Is it kind of like that, or is it a different
Yeah,
type of description?
well, in part, so what St. Louis has done, they actually sponsor a team. And so they're out there trying to help facilitate the team getting to practice, getting to tournaments. They do describe at the tournament. So they're doing live audio description at the tournament so that the audience and, the other teams who are watching, feel more engaged. So, and yeah, again, we're just kind of exploring at this time. I think part of it is just connecting with the partners who are involved so that we can then help support sharing the information to our listeners who could potentially get involved. And, the sports are usually a great blend, especially with beep baseball. It's a blend of sighted and non-sighted people who are teammates. So it could be that some of our staff even want to be part of the team as a, pitcher or a catcher or a outfielder. So
That's
so
fun.
yeah, it's interesting to see. We're really curious to see how it'll work out. But I think, yeah, being at the events to describe is one way of doing it, and then
Mhm.
kind of sharing the word, I think.
And I guess for like what you've been kind of like watching for St. Louis, are they kind of describing more of those events in detail, like
Mhm.
maybe like what the surroundings are like? Because I know you were talking about in the theater, you were kind of
Mhm.
explaining how those readers tell listeners like maybe this happened in the crowd or we're skipping a scene, describing like those costumes. Is it kind of similar for like
Yeah,
the events
yeah.
with sports? Okay.
Right, yeah. So for if you're not close enough to the action to hear it yourself, because the baseballs are pretty loud when they're beeping, but if you're even out in the dugout, it's harder to hear the ball. You don't know if it's a foul or if it made it in. Just describing how the person is trying to catch the ball in the outfield, who collected the ball. So they tell the scorekeeper, but you can't always hear that announcement.
Mhm.
So you could say outfielder 10 got it midfield out, or something like that. So it's a lot like a normal sportscaster, but then also describing maybe what's happening in the dugout or the cheers that they're doing on the field. Then
That's
yeah,
that's pretty
the
fun.
logistics of the runs and outs
Mhm.
as well.
That's pretty fun. I don't know enough about baseball really to even give those type of details. So I'm sure the people that are really committed to that have a lot of information, and that's really cool that they're able to show that to like, or describe that to those individuals who maybe can't see that as well or
Right. Yeah.
register.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm wondering, since you do have a decent size of your population does have a type of visual impairment, but then you said around like only 10% or so were born blind and visually impaired. And here at CCVI, we kind of work more with that population. A lot of our kiddos here and just out in the community that we serve were either born with a visual impairment or developed one a little later, but still when they were a kid. So they usually have to work with Braille or learn Braille or like large print and everything. And that could be seen as a very like old school kind of way, It's,
Hmm.
I mean, a Brailler looks like it's from like the 1500s. I mean, that
Yes.
style hasn't that style hasn't changed too much. And I know there's a lot of debate on if Braille is still relevant in such a high tech world and everything.
Mhm.
And I know that's only a 10% small percentage of your population, but what are your thoughts or like what's your take on that initial like Braille literacy, print literacy, and associating it with your work and like the tech
Mhm.
world, I guess?
Yeah. So from everything I've witnessed and all the people I've interacted with through, just interacting with listeners and, National Federation for the Blind or American Council for the Blind, everything I've read and learned points to Braille readers have a much richer career as far as the earlier you learn, the better you're going to
Mhm.
be working a job, finishing a degree, and really feeling really independent. So I hugely support Braille. We're trying to make sure everything we have is in Braille, even our business cards. So we don't want to phase that interaction with Braille out. And talking to listeners who teach Braille and are Braille proofreaders and embossers, I think that it has added a lot of value to their life, being able to refer back to something without having to ask. So I think Braille is very important. I think the earlier you learn, the better. And if you've lost your sight and I would say even up to your 50s, learning Braille will make your life easier in the long run, from what I have understand and everything that people have told me.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear from like your perspective that you still like value that braille and understand like the importance of it. So everyone who's listening, you heard it here first. Even with all this high tech and the technology,
Mhm.
it still is important to have that braille literacy and everything. But of course,
Yeah.
a lot of the services that you guys are offering can't be translated to braille or that large print. So it's awesome to
Right.
hear that you guys are working with it.
Yeah, and I mean, it really speaks to the core of our services as well, because people will come up to us and say, "Well, screen readers can do that, and AI voices are really good." But everything that, again, we hear from our listeners is that nothing replaces that human voice and
Absolutely.
that direct connection to someone who's reading it because they care, and that emotion that's in the voice. And AI is good, but I think most of your listeners would know, and your
Mhm.
constituents, that you can only listen to so much screen reader voice a day before you
Very true.
you want to hear a human voice, and so it really helps people feel more connected to the community when they know it's coming from a person. And I would say Braille is similar to that. It's a visceral connection to
Mhm.
text in a way that it's you and the text without any sort of mediation. So I think there's a strength to that. And
Absolutely. That was well said. I can't even say anything more on that. I loved how you worded that. So with your time with Audio Reader, since it's been a minute, it's been a while, you went from volunteering to now a full-time position. You have your own podcast, you're helping out with all these services. I'm sure you've met a lot of amazing people and have done a lot of amazing projects, readings. But what would you say one of your favorite is from your time with Audio Reader?
oh, that's a tough one.
No, I know.
One thing that recently happened that stands out is an audio description event that we had here in Lawrence. It was a dance event for Tetris, and there were so many different aspects that really stood out to me. One was just planning for it, because we knew we were going to have listeners there. And so we were able to talk to the production company ahead of time and find out kind of what their props were. So we had some context, because there was no script. So it's very different. Usually, if we're coming out to do, West Side Story at Starlight, which is coming up, they have a
So,
script to go off of. So you know what's going to happen. But when it's a
mhm.
dance routine, there's no script. So we had to find out, what is this all about? And so they were kind of doing contortion. They were trying to shape themselves into Tetris shapes. So L's mixing in with, twisted shapes. And one of the props they used was a Rubik's Cube. And, if you've, Rubik's cubes usually are flat, and they have it's a cube shape with six different colors on each side, but there's no way to differentiate the colors if you can't see them. And so I was trying to think about how we could make that more engaging for our listeners. And I found an adaptive Rubik's Cube where each side is a different texture. And so that way, someone without sight could feel it and understand, what is this Rubik's Cube and why is it important to the dance routine, because they were twisting it around and the dancer would react. And it was just wonderful to be in the audience with several listeners at the same time. And I had the audio description on, so I was listening with them and I know what they were hearing. And it was just really fun to see how it added so much context and made it a dance routine, which is so visual, made it feel like you were there and you could understand what was happening, and they're laughing and just having such a great time. And it was a great way to connect with our mission and know that direct impact we're having.
That's awesome. I mean, an adaptive and tactile Rubik's Cube, that is so cool. I have never seen one of those before. Never really heard about them. It's kind of crazy, all the adaptive things that are and tactile things that are out there. You never really know
Yeah.
until you look. But that's really cool that you went out of your way to kind of find that to relate the dance in that tactile kind of way. So then they could interpret it better as they're listening. And yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, dance is such a visual like art and
Mhm.
everything. It's kind of how do you translate the visual into words? And it sounds like you guys did a really, really good job at translating that.
Yeah, we had one of our, actually, she used to work here at Audio Reader. Her name is Jen Nigro, and she helped bring audio description to Audio Reader. And so she came out of retirement to do that because she was so excited for it. And just beautiful description. And we had one of our listeners, she's in her late 50s and had never touched a Rubik's Cube in her life. So it was really fun. She was really excited about it.
Oh, that's so heartwarming. I love that. That's really cool. She came out of retirement, and yeah, I'm sure you get hear a lot of just like feel good moments from your listeners telling you like how your work is affecting them. And that's really
Yeah.
cool that yeah, she got to feel a Rubik's Cube for the first time.
Yeah. And there's so many times where I have family members even come up to me and say, "Oh, my mother or my father started listening and they just are so more entertained. They feel less, isolated." And
Mm.
so it helps the whole family, especially if you're caregiving for someone and, you can't take care of them and entertain them. That's too much to ask.
Huh.
So, yeah, it's a great way to help them feel independent and get access to fun things.
Definitely. I mean, I know here at CCVI, we don't just like work with the kid and treat the kid. We also work with the whole family because I think that's a big part of it. I mean,
Mhm.
much like your services, they're for the individuals who have maybe the visual impairment or dyslexia or that physical disability that they're needing assistance with. But it's not just, I mean, it is for them, but it's also for the family to kind of, introduce these things and to participate in everything. And I could definitely see how your services in particular can like help a whole family kind of do things more together because you are giving them that option to be included.
It's a great service. So I love being involved with it and seeing how it impacts people's lives and yeah, it gives them a sense of independence because I think
Mhm.
that's from what I've noticed meeting people at the National Federation for the Blind and things like that, um, people who gain that sense of independence, they just thrive so much more and
Definitely.
it's wonderful. Yeah.
I know that's a big thing that we teach here. And part of our actually expanded core curriculum is independent living skills. And it's kind of crazy to think of all the things that you don't normally think of until you're put in that situation of either teaching those skills or offering services to heighten that independence. And
Hmm.
yeah, kind of seeing how people use those and then feel more independent. It's really kind of amazing to watch and
Yeah.
hear and experience, especially if you are sighted and you don't really realize, oh, I guess, I would have never thought of maybe that skill being such an important skill, but now that, I'm seeing it and I'm hearing from a different perspective, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value in
Mm.
joining support groups and networks like any of those networks, organizations who can connect you with other people because I think it helps to see how other people learn to be independent because I feel like everyone loses people who lose their sight, it's at a different time in their life. It's in a different way. There's so many different reasons that it's happening. It's nice to connect with people and see how they dealt with it and, learn from each other. So I love to attend large events where I can watch that networking happen and friends who see each other every year at, conventions and
Hmm.
it's great. Learn from each other.
Definitely. We love all the community building. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else that I could really want to ask. I feel like you've covered it. I didn't even have to ask a lot of things. You just kind of gave those details, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope anyone who wants to listen will listen. Audioreader.net is our accessible website. It's really set up for anyone with low or no vision, screen reader friendly, and all of that. And yeah, give it a shot. And if you're interested in those live audio description events, we do have them listed on our website, or just give us a call, and we're happy to tell you when they're coming up.
So everyone listening, you can find them at audioreader.net. And do you guys have any socials you would want people to check out and stay up to date on?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and some YouTube. We have a little bit of YouTube, and they're all at Audio Reader or KU Audio Reader because we are on the University of Kansas website or campus. So we are associated with KU, so you could find us KU Audio Reader. And yeah, so we do post a lot of events on Facebook as well.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining. You definitely taught me a lot. It was very interesting. And I hope everyone who's listening that you took something away. And maybe if you're not looking into audio reader as a resource, but maybe you know somebody, be sure to share this podcast out so others have access to these amazing resources and the great work that audio reader is doing in our community.
Thank you so much, Emma.